Welcome back to our course on PSE 2018. In this section we're going to take a look at the very important subject of help in PSE. Even if you've used a recent version right up to the latest version, PSE 15, this section is important as the help facility has changed significantly in this version. And one of the most significant factors in this is that as of the time that I'm recording this, almost all of the help that you can get is only available online. So you need to be online to make use fully of the PSE 2018 help system. So in this section we're going to look at the Organizer help menu first. Then we're going to look at what I'm going to call Getting Started help. That's both help and video tutorials. We're going to look at key concepts, and then I'll talk about Adobe support and the PSE forums. And finally, I'll talk about something that experienced PSE users will probably have come to rely on, and that's the help PDFs. So we're going to start with the Organizer help menu. One thing I'm not going to do in this section is review the Editor help menu. That's something for you to do after you've been through this section. So if I go up to the help menu, there are actually quite a few things on it, and I'm going to cover several of them quite quickly and a couple of them in a reasonable amount of detail. But the very first thing is the item at the top there, Elements Organizer Help. There is a standard keyboard shortcut in the Adobe PSE products of F1 to take you to the help, and as I mentioned already, basically you need to be online to get this help. Now if I click on Elements Organizer Help, this is browser-based help, and when you click on the help link as I just did, it takes you through to a part of the help system which is underlined there. It's called User Guide, and it's structured, it's tree structured help. So if you wanted help, for instance, on viewing and fixing media files, you'd click there. That takes you through to a sort of next level. What about grouping photos in version sets? Click there. Now that will either take you through the structure of the help, or it will take you to a help page such as this one. And within the page there may be further links to other help topics. As I mentioned earlier in this section, right at the end I'm going to talk about the help PDFs. And if you've used an earlier version of PSE, you'll be familiar with the help PDFs and probably come to rely on them because they are a great way of getting offline help. Well, at the time of recording this, there are no help PDFs in PSE 2018. What the help PDFs contained, or the equivalent of it in PSE 2018, is what you now get online in this help system. Now, of course, for very many versions of PSE, there has been an online help system as well, but the two have been mostly different in various areas. To a large extent, what seems to have happened is that Adobe have improved the online help and removed the PDFs, but I'll talk more about that later on. For the moment, when you get to a page with the help that you need, you can obviously read through the page. There's usually some sort of menu on the right to what's on the page, and at any time you can go back through the help system, and eventually you'll get back to the top level there, what I'm loosely going to call User Guide Home. So that's fine if you understand where the topic you need help on comes in the overall structure of the organizer or the editor. But what's very likely is that you'll need to search for help on a particular subject. Let's suppose that I want help on the magic wand. Enter magic wand in the search box there, hit enter. And I'm given help on the magic wand, but it's not actually directed specifically at Photoshop Elements. I get help on the magic wand from any of a range of Adobe products. And in fact, a couple of the earliest help topics there are not about Photoshop Elements, they're about Photoshop. Now you can narrow the choice down by selecting the Photoshop Elements product by checking its checkbox here, and that will filter the help to just Photoshop elements. Having said that, you've got to be a little bit careful because some of these topics are not really help topics, they are from forums, and you can identify those by the link here, forums.adobe.com. And this is a question somebody asked related to Photoshop Elements 13. So even if you've narrowed the choice down to Photoshop Elements, be careful about any matches you see. However, if you go down a little bit there, you'll find here is a help topic. Use tools to make selections. helpx.adobe.com. Click on use tools to make selections. And this should be a help page, which it is. And one of the things covered on it will be the magic wand tool. Click there and it shows me how to use the magic wand tool. So the search, I'm sure you're going to find, is a very useful help tool. And by the way, when you're browsing through help, if you need to go back to the top of the user guide, there will usually be a link like this one, Photoshop Elements User Guide, to take you back to the top. And in terms of general help, there's just one other thing to make you aware of. In various situations in both the organizer and the editor, you'll get the opportunity to access contextual help. So this is help which is basically provided in the context of what you're doing. So if I go here to the edit menu in the organizer and color settings, that takes me to a dialog. I'm going to come to this dialog later on, but there's a link in it, learn more about color settings. And if I click on that, it's going to take me into the help system, but not at the top, not at the user guide level. It actually takes me to the relevant page about color management, and that happens at various points in both the organizer and the editor. And as usual, of course, to close the help, all I do is close the browser. I'm back now at the help menu in the organizer. Let's look at some of the other options. One of them is System Info. And this dialog is very important. It will tell you, for instance, which version of the organizer you're running, but it will also tell you what your current catalog is, information which you're going to need in various places. And going further down, it gives me information about my current system, so operating system, memory, and so on. That's System Info. And there is a copy option there which can be very useful if you have to get support from Adobe or perhaps report a problem in one of the forums. People may ask you for a copy of your system info, and that's how you can provide that. Another important option on the menu is updates. Now, as I'll explain later on, it's very important that you're aware of updates to PSE. Bear in mind that I have actually 3 versions of PSE installed, and 2 of them have pending updates, Adobe Photoshop Elements 15 and Photoshop Elements 2018. When an update is available, to execute the update, I click on Update. Alternatively, I can leave it and come back to it at a more convenient time, which is what I'm going to do on this occasion. But be aware of updates, and we'll talk about update settings a little bit later on in the course. 2 other options there. One of them is About Elements Organizer, which will tell you exactly which build of Elements Organizer you're using, which you might need if you need to get support and have a particularly tricky problem to solve. Just click on that particular panel to close it. And then another option is Welcome Screen. If you want to change your preference on the welcome screen as to what happens when you start PSE 2018, this opens the welcome screen. You can access the gear menu and change that option there. Let's look now at 1 or 2 of the more specific options from help. Let's go to Getting Started. When you click on Getting Started, you can choose Photoshop Elements or Premiere Elements. We want Photoshop Elements. And it actually opens the help at the top page of the user guide, because basically the top page of the user guide covers Introduction to Photoshop Elements. So, for instance, it's got a section in there, What's New in Photoshop Elements, some workspace basics, introductory material on the use of PSE 2018. So, of course, if you want to start using the help to get up to speed on PSE 2018, that's a good place. But let me go back to the menu again. There's also an option there, video tutorials. And if you'd like to learn the basics of PSE 2018 using Adobe official videos, they are here, Photoshop Elements tutorials. They tend not to go into as much detail as I do. And obviously one option for you is to sit down and just sort of start working your way through them. And another option would be, as we come to each topic in the course, check if there's a tutorial from Adobe and watch that as well as what I cover, and you'll get two versions of the story if you like. The next thing I want to look at is key concepts. Now, although I'm not going to be assuming any knowledge of PSE on this course, I will be assuming a certain level of knowledge of photography. Not too much, but there will be some things that I'm going to assume you understand. And when we get to each of these more technical photographic terms, I'll discuss exactly what level of knowledge I am expecting. If there are any photographic terms that I use and you're not familiar with the meaning of that term, this little Photoshop Elements visual dictionary is very good. Let's suppose you don't know what anti-aliasing is. Anti-aliasing. Click on that and it will explain pretty well what anti-aliasing is. It's usually a fairly short explanation, and apart from the explanation, in most places there is also a link to some of the tools that you can use to achieve whatever the effect is. For example, here things like how to smooth text, how to smooth the selection, but also related context related to anti-aliasing. What about blur and compression and gradient? So it's a very good source of information about photographic terms, and if you like, exactly where those photographic terms meet PSE. This is a very, very good source of information on any terms where you're not really quite sure what they mean, or you'd like a fuller explanation of them. Let's look next at support. And this takes you through to a different part of the help system. You can access the user guide from here, of course. You can access the tutorials from here. You can access a beginner's guide. But also, if you look at the other links down here, you have some support information, such as how do I download and install PSE, why won't it install, sort of troubleshooting type of information. And you also have access here to the Photoshop Elements Community Forum. And in fact, if I click through there, you have links to various forums where issues related to the use of Photoshop Elements are discussed. You have a facility there just to search the forums. And if you look over on the right, you have access to the Photoshop Elements FAQ. And again, links to getting started, tutorials, user manual, and so on. Now, I do suggest that you spend some time browsing the support area and the forum area. If you ever need support, you will need your Adobe ID, and you may well be asked for things like a copy of your system info, exactly which build of PSE you're using, and so on. But in my experience, the support from Adobe is pretty good. Now, the last thing I want to mention is something that I did mention earlier on. I just want to explain it a little bit more. In previous versions of PSE, from the support area, you will be able to access two PDF files, one for the editor, one for the organizer. They were quite big PDF files. I think the last editor one was about 400 pages, and they basically comprised all of the available help on each of those two programs. Most people, including me, who've used PSE for some time, have got to the point of expecting those PDFs with each release. Well, I think the official line from Adobe at the moment on the PSE 2018 release is that the PDFs are only delayed and that they will be out. The last figure I heard was January 2018, which is still a couple of months away based on when I'm recording this. Obviously, I have no control over whether those PDFs appear. But one thing I will say is that based on what I've seen so far, the quality of the help in PSE has significantly improved, and items that I would have looked for in the PDF in earlier versions, I'm tending to find in the help now, so that's actually a good sign. If you like the PDFs, because the big advantage of the PDFs is that you can download them and they provide you with offline help, I suggest you keep your eye open for them, and maybe by the time you're following this course they will be available. But that's it on help. I'll see you in the next section.